Hi, I'm Cressel Anderson, this is Makercise. In this episode, I'll show you how I use my homemade chainsaw mill to turn logs into boards.
My friend took out a few trees in his front yard, and they just happened to be the right diameter for me to use my chainsaw mill. I fabricated this mill out of square tubing, and it clamps onto the bar of my chainsaw. I can adjust it up and down to give me different depths of cuts. After I've cut the first slab off of the log, I get a flat reference surface that I can use to cut more boards. I use these plastic wedges to support the end that I've already cut. That way, as I'm cutting the rest of the log, the first part doesn't pinch the saw. I welded up this chainsaw mill a few years ago. We had some trees taken out in our backyard, and I wanted to try my hand at making some lumber. It worked, but I was using a standard cross-cutting chain. A cross-cutting chain has a fairly steep angle compared to a ripping chain. A ripping chain has a shallow angle. The ripping chain works much better than a cross-cutting chain. I didn't have to sharpen the ripping chain a single time as I was making all these boards. My interest in milling lumber came from my granddad. He would take me to his sawmill when I was a little boy, and that was always a lot of fun. I attach angle brackets to the ends of the logs, then I can put the rails on top of those. After I attach the first one, I adjust the second bracket to be parallel. The first time I used the mill, I used 2x4s. The 2x4s didn't work nearly as well as angle iron. I set the rails on top, and then I adjust one end so that the rails are in the same plane.
So does this need to go up or down?
To make it level, or?
Yeah, and pretty much the way to do that is kind of go down until you see one of the corners disappear. Like get these two lined up. How's that?
I don't know how exact you want to be, but I think it needs to go down just a hair. Maybe half a hair? Actually, it may be good, but okay. I don't know if that made a difference, but I think
it's way better than it was
it's better
before.
than it was, yeah.
All right.
Adjusting those rails was way easier with help. I used locking pliers and C-clamps to secure the rails to the brackets. The locking pliers work much better because they give me the proper clearance for the chainsaw mill. Once the rails are in place, I adjust the deck. I've been adjusting it to 4.5 inches based on my setup, and that seems to work pretty good for the initial cut. After the rails and the depth are set, I crank the chainsaw and I make the first cut. One of the tips I got from watching Matt Cremona was to position the log on an incline. That way gravity helps you push the saw along. When I get to the end of the rails, I have to change out the C-clamps for locking pliers. That way I have the clearance to finish the cut. Setting up the guides for the first cut is the most time-consuming part of milling with a chainsaw mill. But taking the time to get those rails planar will give you a nice flat surface from which you can cut the remainder of the boards. The second day I learned a trick, and that's to use shims instead of measuring to set the deck height.
1.5 inch spacer.
I have a 20-inch bar on my chainsaw, so when I built the chainsaw mill, I built it so it would cut 16 inches wide, and that's about what that board is. From when I was a boy until now, I've always enjoyed the process of milling lumber. I also cherish a memory of me and my granddad planting a bunch of white pines. Take an opportunity this Arbor Day to renew these resources for your grandchildren. On my second day of milling, I went through and I batched out the first cuts. I did all of them at once, and that way I only had to set up the saw once. That really made it go much quicker. I got quite a bit of lumber out of these poplar logs, and right now it's stacked and drying in my basement. Thanks for watching.